Welcome, I'm Conrad, and we're back with our first guest of the new year 2023. Before we get started, if you're new to the show, you can put your questions or comments in the chat or comments field, whether that's be in LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. And you can start, as always, by writing down where in the world you're watching this from today. Now, we've all seen the news about layoffs in the tech industry and in the wider economy. It seems like no one is safe from these large disruptions in the workplace. All of us are probably feeling some degree of anxiety about our own work position. Now, our guest today has seen many people go through these periods. Jane Barrett is the co-founder of the Career Farm, a recruitment and career coaching company. She's advised thousands of people through boom and bust cycles. So, welcome, Jane.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon, isn't it? Thank you for inviting me.
Jane, let's start with some alarm signals that people could be picking up in their workplace that suggest certain, possible career disruption coming up. What are some of these signals?
Yeah, I mean, there are many. They could be obviously profit warnings, that type of thing. I mean, it depends where you are in the company, but you might be close to the sales department and know that sales are down, and know that that's an issue, or that you've lost a big client, and that's. Oh, we're just getting a little bit of feedback. I don't know if somebody is on the call and they could mute themselves. I'm just getting a rustling sound. Oh, that's much better.
Oh no, I think it's the wind coming through my window.
Oh, okay. It is very windy in the UK at the moment. So there's that. I mean, I think leadership changes. So new teams brought in. Often people who are brought in want to bring their people they've worked with in the past in. And other things like technology, keeping an eye on, you're seeing technology starting to disrupt your industry. I know even in careers that's happened to me. There's a company that came in and basically used AI to automate putting together CVs, and we used to do loads of work actually putting CVs together and helping MBAs and students do that, and literally that stream of work just disappeared overnight. So even in the careers area, disruptive technology can come in quite quickly and literally take away roles and work. So I think there's a kind of some of the things, and obviously people leaving, especially people who might be close to what's really going on. Why are they leaving? They say rats desert a sinking ship, don't they? So those are some of the flags I would suggest.
All right. Before we go on to what people could do if they see these alarm signals, wanted to have a shout out to some of our viewers. So we have Victor, who's a long-time viewer. He's watching from Bangalore. Hi, Victor.
Hi, Victor.
Yaroslav's watching from Poland. Pratika's from India. Mohammed's watching from Qatar. We've got Roxana from charming old York.
Ah, near me.
This is York, UK, not in the US, yeah. Someone's watching from Rotterdam. Marcel's watching from Coventry. Someone's from London. Faisal's also from Qatar. Yikming's from Singapore, where I'm from. Another person from London. Chandra from Indonesia. And Odibe is from Nigeria. So welcome, everyone. And remember, if you've got any questions for Jane, put them in the chat box. Jane, what happens if people find themselves in this situation where they see these alarm bells going off in front of them? What should they do?
I think that the first thing is to kind of assess where they are and start to get prepared, basically. And I think everybody should regularly review where they are in their career. Are they on the track to where they want to go? I think in my work, one of the the biggest things I see, and I've done this myself as well, is I've got comfortable, I've just kind of gone along with the flow, and then bam, something happens and I didn't really see it. You know, the example that I gave about, you know, technology taking over a part of our business. So I think it's always good to be kind of prepared and be thinking about the next thing. So, you know, to basically put a stake in the ground and go, okay, where am I now? Am I happy in this type of role? Am I looking for, you know, if I'm looking to stay, do I need to change my role so I can evolve with the company? Perhaps I need to upskill in technology because that is the way forward you know, that is going to be very important in my industry. Do I need to upskill, or is it that I, you know, basically I need to move companies? And get yourself ready for that. And I think, you know, clearly things like doing your LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn has become just so important in managing your career, not only to, you know, develop yourself as a thought leader in your area, but also to get jobs and to network. And we all know that, you know, a lot of jobs are found by who you know, networking, and companies positively encourage their staff to recommend people, because it saves them a lot of money, because recruiters, you know, using a headhunter, you know, will cost anything between, you know, 15% to 33% of salary. So it's, you know, it's really important for you to network, and really, I suppose, not, you know, be constantly talking to people and networking with key people who potentially can hire you or can refer you on. You know, to be knowledgeable about what's going on in your industry, which are the growing companies, which potentially might be on a track to hire. You know, another kind of flag really of a company potentially looking to hire is their round of funding. So for smaller companies, you know, what round of funding are they at? Are they at a level where they can start to hire at a senior level? So if that's your level, or what kind of roles are they recruiting? And as they get more funding, they will potentially hire more people. I mean, there are indexes like the FT does an industry index of the fastest growing companies in Europe. I think it's the fastest 1,000 companies who are growing fast in Europe. And that would be a great place to start. There's similarly ones for the UK for privately owned companies. So you can see the ones which are growing, because they're the people who will be potentially taking on staff.
I wanted to put this on. You mentioned LinkedIn. And I saw this, someone had tweeted about how, you know, on LinkedIn, everybody bigs themselves up, right? So in reality, you're Anakin Skywalker, but on LinkedIn, you're Darth Vader, you're Seth Lord, you're, I don't know, father of a princess, whatever. So Jamie, I'm sure you don't want people to big themselves, overly exaggerate themselves, but what advice do you have for people when, you know, obviously there's a lot of people who might be laid off now. Everyone's bigging themselves up. The level of noise is so great. How can people stand out against Darth Vader?
Yeah, I think it's really understanding what your unique selling points are and really focusing down on that, and not just writing everything you can do. And that's the most common mistake I see. So it's quite hard as a recruiter to see if somebody's doing lots of different things. They're trying to stay open to lots of different opportunities, but in reality, it actually is just a lot of noise, and it's very difficult to understand, you know, what are your key strengths? What can you do for me as a company? Can you increase profits? Can you reduce costs? Can you streamline processes? You know, what can you do for me? So if you can really focus down on that, and that really comes back to assessment, you know, so what we call, career coaches call career assessment, is basically just really understanding, what are your strengths? What are you brilliant at? What are your values? What's important to you? What are you really interested in? What kind of environment you want to work in, and kind of what are your long-term goals? So, you know, really focus down on those areas, and then you will be more tailored. And then the flip side of that is looking at the market. What is the market looking for? Look at the job specs, see what they're looking for, and make sure those are in your profile. So it's like this matching piece, really. So, you don't need to put, in irrelevant things or things that aren't irrelevant. I mean, I see people put the names of their pet cats on CVs. So, so it's really trying to be as relevant as possible and pick up those keywords as well from the job spec that recruiters will be searching under. Recruiters and researchers, talent acquisition, they use LinkedIn a lot, and you need to be found by those people.
All right. Jane, we actually have a question from, I think it's your neighbor in York, Roxana. So Roxana asks, what would be the best way to prepare employees who are perhaps used to comfort for often inevitable changes, especially in small companies?
I think to try to get them to have the mindset that they're managing their own career and that you're not going to do that for them. It's like this ownership thing, and to try and make them more proactive about their career. It is difficult because I think some people are fixed mindset and some people aren't. And it's quite hard to change people who are fixed mindset. I think people who have a growth mindset are easier to work with in terms of employees, because they know that things may change, their role might change, and they may have to move at some point. And some companies do that very well, and they're able to actually positively encourage people to leave if that's the right thing for them to do, and it's the right thing for the business to do, and it's not seen as a hopefully too stressful thing. Particularly consulting. I've worked in consulting, and they often have consultants go out into industry and then they come back, actually. So it's seen as part of your career progression to actually go into industry and get some experience. So it's really about coaching them really to take control of their career and their future, really. I hope that answers your question, Roxana.
And I guess part of that would be having a process in a company or organization of frequent performance appraisals, meetings, so that employees get that feedback, they know how they're going to be developing, and also it's also going to be two-way, because the employees can also let their line managers know how they're feeling.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point as well. And kind of SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, threats in terms of that role as well. Because I think what I see is the worst thing is if it's a shock. It's a shock that you've lost your job. So you don't have time to prepare. You don't have time to develop your network. You don't have time to get your LinkedIn profile together, your CV, because finding a job takes time, especially at a senior level. So if you're thrown that as a shock, then and it comes out of nowhere, that's very difficult to manage in terms of, I mean, a lot of people get redundancy, but, that doesn't last forever. So, I think it's having those open and honest conversations with employees as early as possible is the way forward.
Well, we'll come back to some of what you said in terms of how do you prepare for the skills, etc. We just want to get this question about LinkedIn, this automated filtering system. Is that a good way to filter qualified candidates for a job?
I mean, it is a system. It has flaws. You will probably miss people. It's probably not amazing from a diversity point of view. I think, I still believe that a lot of people are found through word of mouth by, going out there, networking, finding out who are good people in that field. And that's why, technology and LinkedIn hasn't, completely cut out recruiters, because there is a role for headhunters, and that's what they do very well. Is they're out there in the market talking to people, finding out who's good at this role, getting referrals. And those people may not be on LinkedIn, or their LinkedIn profile might not be optimized because they're not really looking for a job, or they're just sick of being approached by recruiters, so they don't actually reply to anybody on LinkedIn. I mean, there's a lot of people who are not very active on LinkedIn because they don't need to be. So yeah, it's a good system. Is it the best for recruiting? No, I think you need a combination of technology and also the human touch.
Cool. Jane, you mentioned how a lot of times people react with shock when they are laid off, they're passed over. So you mentioned also the alarm signals that people should be looking at.
Yeah.
In your experience, have you seen people who get caught in that headlights, kind of they know they need to do something, but they just don't do it?
Yes, I'm smiling because a friend of mine came for lunch over Christmas, and she was made redundant probably about 6 months ago now. And I would say she's still in the shock, denial, anger part of the change curve. So the change curve is something that has been developed from actually a grieving process. And it's been developed by Kubler-Ross in the 1960s, and it applies very well to going through change. So my friend, she was still very angry. She was a little bit in denial. So she was very much on that first part of the curve. And no matter how many solutions I gave her, like, well, I'm a career coach, I could do a mock interview for you, she just completely ignored me, bless her. It's just, I think she's in that bit where she needs to vent. She's annoyed, she's cross. And so she needs to move through that before she can take advice and take action. I mean, she is taking action. She is going on interview, but she hasn't secured anything yet. And I would probably suggest that if I did a mock interview with her, she would come across as quite angry and quite cross with her company, and it would affect how she shows up in that interview. So I think people can get stuck in that, and that's why we were talking earlier, Conrad, about this, that if you do need to, as an employer, you need to provide some space for people to be listened to, and before moving to solution focus. Sometimes people just need to be heard. But there does come a point when you do need to move out of that, because you need to move through that and into, taking action, accepting the situation for what it is. And I think a lot of people get stuck in, I just can't believe this has happened to me, especially if, like my friend's been very successful in her role, and she's been in that role a long time, I think 20 years. So there's a lot of baggage with that, I would say. A lot of hurt, really, as well.
So for those people who may be watching or listening to this late in just audio, the Kubler-Ross change curve that Jane was mentioning, you've got stage 1, which is shock, denial, stage 2, anger, depression, and stage 3, where the curve starts to go upwards. You go through acceptance and integration. Jane, I think the first couple of phases is quite self-explanatory, but what is integration?
Well, I suppose it's starting to accept it. It's taking action to actually integrate that change into your life. So it's like, okay, this is going to happen. I'm going to make the best of this, and it's a positive. You start to see it in a positive way. Actually, there was a lot about my job I didn't like, and actually it was time for me to move on. So, I'm going to integrate this change into my life, and I'm going to embrace it. So that for me, that's my interpretation of it. It may not be the academic one, but that's how I see it. And to be honest, in career coaching, and if it's useful to the client, then I use it.
We have some questions. The first one here, someone from LinkedIn. Great points, Jane. I recently worked with a coach who introduced me to planned happenstance career theory, preparing to be best prepared for the unknown opportunity that might present itself further down the line. Jane, are you familiar with this career theory?
I'm not actually, but I mean, I can kind of guess what it might be, but I love that. That sounds very interesting. And I think I suppose it's being open to something happening that is aligned with what you want to do. I do think you you do need to do some work on what it is you want, what it is you have to offer, and what it is you want, because otherwise I think people can be too scattered and be looking at so many different things, they just get a bit confused. And also they might take something that might not be right for them. But I think, having that open mindset to explore, and actually a neighbour of mine has recently changed roles into a role in sustainability, and she did lots of research, spoke to lots of people, and an opportunity came to her, and a lot of that was because she put herself out there in terms of finding out about the role, networking with people, exploring. I mean, these are called what we call informational interviews. It's not I want a job, it's I'm really curious about what you do and your company and how it's expanding. And that might lead to potentially being referred to somebody who's hiring, or, so I think that's what this user has explained to be planned happenstance. But no, she'll definitely look that up. Sounds interesting.
And Jane, I think you make a really good point, which is you want to do all that networking, that relationship building before you need a job, because that's, when you're desperate and you need a job, that's precisely the point when people can sort of smell that desperation and think, maybe I don't want to speak to you. But if you're quite comfortable and you start talking to people and you show what you can provide, I think that's a useful basis and a great time to do that networking.
Yeah. And I'd just like to add that, I have an extrovert preference. So I love meeting people for coffees and talking to people and all that kind of thing. If that's not you, there are other ways to network, and it's finding a style that suits you. So my husband has an introvert preference, and he would much prefer to go to a CPD, so that's a continued professional development meeting, and talk to people about what they're discussing in that meeting. Whereas I would turn up to the opening of an envelope. And to be honest, I have to be really careful that I don't spread myself too thin going to lots of random events, and I have to really focus. So, maybe looking at, developing yourself as a thought leader, maybe it's blogging, if you prefer to write, or, you might want to do a podcast. One of my podcast guests, Josephine Bush, she did a podcast to move from, she was working for an accountancy firm. I think it was Ernst & Young or someone like that. And she wanted to move into sustainability. She'd done a bit of work on that, but she launched a podcast called Sustainability and You. And she interviewed top people in the sustainability field. And that gave her a huge network of guests to contact, and it really expanded her network. So for, many of those people, she could then ask for, develop a relationship and potentially get work. And she did get work. She got many non-executive or a certain number of non-exec positions. And, she's definitely developed her career off the back of the podcast indirectly.
Well, wonderful. And we also have a question from Faisal. Last, if you're working full-time, you're in the mid-career phase, what's the best way to upskill in the face of upcoming disruptive technologies, particularly fintech and AI?
That's a good question. I don't know specifically, but I would look at courses run by, reputable organizations. So, in the North, we have North Coders. There are other ones, like there's General Assembly. I'm not sure if they do AI and fintech. Do you know any, Conrad? Can you think of any that do fintech and AI?
Actually, LinkedIn Learning would be one great platform.
Yeah.
I think maybe this is, for Faisal, if you're in mid-career and you're thinking, oh, how am I going to keep up with this young 20-year-olds who are having all this snazzy stuff? Maybe the other way is you don't have to compete on the same level. Maybe you want to know enough to be dangerous, but then you've got your own experience behind you. So how do you complement that, the new knowledge with your experience in a way that maybe someone fresh out of university can't do, even though they've got deeper expertise than yourself.
Yeah, can I just add to that? Because a client that I had actually volunteered her experience as a kind of advisor to a startup in the fintech area. So you could do this in the fintech AI area. Because she had a long history in financial services, she was able to give them quite a lot of her expertise in terms of the industry. Because, as Conrad said, there are these young, less experienced people, but they won't have a long experience in that industry. So, and that, it was great for her because she learned a lot. She learned a lot about blockchain. And for them, they got all her experience of working in financial services. So it was really win-win. So I think, maybe approaching some interesting companies to offer your advisory, and then you will learn as well. And it's just really networking, talking to people, if there are certain courses you could go on. But I would imagine the best knowledge is just getting involved with some startups.
And I think, Jane, you mentioned Josephine Bush, sustainability, and you podcast. So I think this is what you're referring to.
That's right. Yeah.
But I think this is really great advice that you could use a podcast, use a live stream like this, maybe to expand your network. And if you are in business school at the moment, then actually trying to get an internship or trying to get a project or something like a dissertation just allows, it's almost like a calling card that allows you to speak to a really wide range of people. I think that is a good thing that people can try.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% endorse that, and I talk about this all the time with MBA students. Is to choose a project that future-proofs your career, and it is an opportunity. It opens doors. It's an opportunity to talk to people, and there aren't many times in your career where you have that opportunity, and that's why many people do an MBA, is to have that opportunity to do that project, and that can move you in a different direction. I mean, I remember that the chief executive of Tech Nation, he was an MBA student like 15 years ago, maybe longer. And he did his project in Orange that was then. And he had no experience of working in telecoms. He was from the music industry. He was actually a journalist in the music industry, but he did a project for them on streaming music onto phones. And then that led to a job. And then he managed to totally change career to end up where he is now. So Tech Nation, for those of you outside the UK, is basically a think tank for technology in the UK. So it's a very high profile organization. And he had a senior strategy role for Orange for many years before that. So yeah, absolutely, 100% endorse that. The choice of your project is crucial.
We have this question from Juan, which is, Jane, how do you make sense of the different educational opportunities when you want to make a change? Some counselors have told Juan that he doesn't need an MBA, for example, but a CFA certification.
Yeah. I would be very careful about who you take advice from. So I would talk to the people doing what you want to do and look at their backgrounds, talk to them and ask them what advice they would give you. It isn't for everyone an MBA, but for a lot of people, it is the right step. And it is used by an awful lot of people to make a career change and to accelerate their career, break them out of a function. So, for example, they're in IT and they want to move into a more strategic role and they want to understand the wider business area. So, yeah, so my advice would be to talk to people doing what you want to do, do some research on their backgrounds and really work out which qualification is going to be right for you. There's obviously the network as well, doing an MBA, that gives you a massive network, an opportunity to contact people and alumni. But yeah, for every individual, it's going to be different.
And I think this idea about education, obviously being in a business school, education is really important, and I think people should really look at that. But do you sometimes feel like that's, for some people, that's almost like a crutch in a sense, to think if only I can get this certification, or if only I can get this degree, my career is set. Do you get that sense sometimes?
Yeah, and I think it's the default. I don't know what to do, so I'll do an MBA. And I think the danger with that is that they also think that the business school will get them the job. And while business schools have a lot of contacts, there's a lot of alumni and a lot of great relationships with employers, it is down to you to drive that, to drive your career. So absolutely, yes, I would say that people do use it as a crutch when they don't know what to do. And so it goes back to that, really understanding what it is you have to offer and what it is you really want. And if you do that before you go into the MBA, then you will make the most of the MBA in terms of your connection, meeting people there and alumni, but also your project. You'll make the most of that and you'll hit the ground running. I think another mistake people make is if they do decide to do an MBA, then they get swamped with work and they put careers on the back burner, and really it needs to be as integrated as possible. And obviously, I know that Judge has a great careers department and it's very much integrated into the program. But I think still some students don't get that engaged because they're worried about their work and they get fully involved in the work. So, but yeah, so it is worthwhile taking that time to really think through, what I have to offer, what it is that I want, and is this the best route for me?
I think it's good segue into this question from Saswati, which is Saswati's seen a lot of tenured employees who are quite confused with their career graphs or career progression. What would you suggest to them apart from networking and exploring other options? I guess one way to answer this is, how do you, as a person, figure out what it is that you want to do in your career?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I have a book and I also have an online course just to address this. But essentially, it is, what are your strengths? A lot of people aren't using their strengths. Particularly bright people actually fall into this. I call it the curse of the bright. It's people who have sailed through school, sailed through university, and then haven't really taken the time to think, well, I can do this, but is it what I really love to do? Is it really using my strengths? And Marcus Buckingham, who is a former researcher from Gallup, he wrote a book called Now Develop Your Strengths. And he found in his research, looking at lots of people using their strengths and not using their strengths, that funnily enough, people using their strengths are more successful in their roles because they enjoy it more, because they're using the things they're good at. You will probably find that if you're using a skill that actually you don't really enjoy using, like I hate spreadsheets and it drains my energy. I can do it, but I just hate it. So I outsource it. I outsource that kind of, doing my accounts and that stuff, as I outsourced it as soon as possible. So, your strengths, your values, what's important to you. Perhaps you're confused because actually the company you're working for doesn't really meet your values. Your interests and trends. So as we started off this live stream talking about, future trends, what's going to be disruptive, what are you interested in? And then, and the other areas, managers, and your long-term plans. I think I also see that, the people who are immediately around you, so your manager, your colleagues, can potentially make a role pretty unhappy if there's not a good match there. So it's worth really investigating that before you make a move. So this confusion can often happen because people really aren't clear on their career path. And I've seen this. I did some work with Amazon a couple of years ago where there are a few people who are sat in jobs where they could do it. They weren't excelling. A few of them weren't doing particularly well, but they just couldn't work out what to do next. But actually, once they thought about what their strengths were, they realized they weren't using their strengths most of the time in their job. So hence, they were really drained and exhausted and unhappy. And actually, what they were then going to try and do was move into an area where, 80% of the time they were using their strengths. And that was very energizing. If you look at Myers-Briggs is useful for kind of a starting point of understanding what your preferences are in terms of your personality. I mean, there's more to it than just MBTI, but that's quite a good framework, and you could just Google that and you'll learn a little bit more about it, and that can produce a bit of a aha moment that actually my role is not used, it doesn't play to my strengths and my preferences.
Yeah, you reminded me when you talked about people who weren't just doing okay, something that Adam Grant from Wharton wrote about during, I think it was midway through the pandemic, about people just feeling meh, just languishing, right? So you're not doing badly, you're not doing
Dangerous.
great. It's
Yeah.
just, yeah, it's kind of okay. And that's really quite a dangerous spot to
Very.
be in, because it's almost like that boiled frog. You're not, it's not hot enough, water's not hot enough yet to make you jump out. But if you don't do something, you're going to be cooked. And this
Yeah.
one is, this is your book, isn't it, Jane?
No, it's not actually.
Oh, no, it's not. Oh, I'm so
Well,
sorry. I
it's
thought it was yours.
I don't know how
one
they
was it?
managed it. Well, it is my book, but it's that's a very, very old. It's actually Taking Charge of Your Career.
All right.
That should be on Amazon. The old one is behind me actually there. So don't get
Okay.
that's the old version.
So Jane, you need to do something on search engine optimization.
Yeah,
That
yes,
was the first
I
one
do.
that
I'm going
came
to
up.
write that down. There we go. I'd just like to pick up on that point. The last point you made, Conrad, because I wanted to say something. I can't remember what the question was. What you were just talking about. What were you just talking about?
Languishing.
Languishing. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that is very, very dangerous, because you, especially in your mid-career, you always need to be adding or working to achievements. So, when you do your CV and your LinkedIn profile, you want to be focusing on what have you achieved? And, because that's what recruiters are looking at. What can you do for the company? As I said earlier, can you increase profits? Can you improve our processes? Can you improve our customer service because you're brilliant at tech? Or, can you help us develop our strategy? What is it that you can do? So if you are just doing a day-to-day job and you're doing the same thing, you're just not developing. It's fine to be doing that for different clients, perhaps. Let's say you're in consulting and you're doing the same thing roughly, but it's for different clients. I would class that as that sounds good. That sounds like you're doing a different type of work. But I think it's that very dangerous kind of doing the same thing. It's not very challenging. Is a red flag to be thinking about your development.
Yeah. And for those who are interested, the link to Adam Grant's article about languishing is in the New York Times. I think there's a paywall, but it's well worth a read. And I think he did a TED talk as well about this.
Because they're often the people you get rid of the dead wood, don't you? You get rid of the people who are not really adding lots of value. So you want to make yourself indispensable. Perhaps you are the person who knows about AI and fintech, and so you are the future. I can think of an executive MBA who did a project on sustainability probably 10 years ago, and now he ended up being head of marketing for Cargill because he got the big job because he knew loads about what was coming down the track in the future, and obviously he was good as well, but it did really help. And he did his project on sustainability in the fish industry. So it's that always thinking forward. Where's the market going? What tech's coming down the road? How is my market going to be changing?
Great. We have this question from Paritosh. How do you bounce back in your career by analyzing required skill set in the job market? And Jane, I think you mentioned several places where you can find out which are the industries on the rise. But maybe if you answer this question from the viewpoint of how do you bounce back? How do you get from that Kubler-Ross curve where you're right at the bottom? How do you turn things around?
Yeah. I think when you mean bounce back, maybe I'm not quite sure about this question, but I think maybe it's how do you get the energy to do that? I see people who are job searching, you may feel a bit depressed, and it is quite hard job searching. I know that. And so, there are things you can do to make sure you really look after yourself, because it is a very stressful time. So things like making sure you're still going to the gym if that's what you normally do, keeping your hobbies going, make sure you see your friends and family, generally getting sleep, or, all of those things, eating properly, all of those. I think it's quite easy to get quite stressed about it. And actually, the more stressed you are, you may not be coming across particularly well, like my friend, or potentially like she would come across. So I think sometimes people rush into their next role and they need to take time to recover from, and take some time to bounce back, and get that energy and enthusiasm back. A lot of people who are made redundant or decide that their career is not right for them can feel pretty bruised and battered by it, especially if they're working very, very long hours, and they need to give themselves some time to recover before getting into this kind of analyzing your what it is you want and what it is you have to offer.
Great. I have one question for you, Jane, which is, so far we've been talking about how people who find themselves in a situation of being disrupted should look at things. But some of our audience may find themselves in the not a very nice position where they have to lay off people in their team.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for them?
Well, obviously, the obvious things: treating people with respect, giving them as much time as possible, so it's not a surprise. I think, flagging that there are problems, and being honest and open with people. And I think giving them the support they need, as we talked earlier about that change curve, people probably just want to be heard to start with. They may not be in a position to take advice or action quite yet. But I think once they're through that and they've had a chance to process it, then, putting people in touch with your connections, making the effort to reach out to people, and say, look, I've got some really good people, but I'm going to have to let them go. Could you hire them? I mean, the market is very buoyant in certain sectors at the moment. I was recently working with an MBA student who got made redundant from a startup, actually, I think it was some kind of carbon offsetting company, but he was in technology. And, loads of people were contacting the firm. Lots of people were very helpful in putting him in contact with loads of different people. And he got a job pretty quickly with a consultancy firm. But he was really, really touched by the founders, went out of their way to, network on their employees' behalf and post it on LinkedIn and, and all of that kind of thing. So, networking is really great. And so if you can do that for your employees and support them, pay for outplacement or career coaching, or if you don't have a budget for that, then see if you can get your HR person to do some career coaching, because they will be very familiar with, what a good CV looks like, and then do interview practice and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
And I think it's very important nowadays when information is so widely available that if you treat your employees whom you're laying off well, they may come back, they might have something nice to say. Because obviously, as we see on Twitter, all the vitriol from Twitter employees who've just been unceremoniously laid off, for example. And then it makes it very difficult for the company to hire anyone going forward. Because
Glassdoor reviews stay on there for quite some time. So, and people do look at them. And so, yes, it could affect your ability to hire when things improve. So really important, I think, to treat people as well as possible.
So Jane, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. How can people contact you if they want to follow up?
So they are welcome to email me on jane.barrett@thecareerfarm.com, or they can contact me on LinkedIn. Those are the two best ways to follow me, really.
And if you watch, there's the QR code up there, which will bring you to Jane's LinkedIn profile directly. So please feel free, if you feel that you would like to know more about how you can get reoriented in your career, email Jane or go to her LinkedIn profile. Jane, thank you so much for this advice. Thanks to everyone as well who, with your comments. It's been great seeing everyone again. And just to let you know that our next episode will be this same time next week, and it will feature Roger Mosey, who worked for 30 years at the BBC in the news department and BBC Sports. So last year, we covered media disinformation. You can find those episodes on our YouTube channel. But Roger's going to share his thoughts about how broadcast news can improve and continue to be a force for informed discussion and counter misinformation. So he's written this book, 20 Things That Would Make the News Better, and we'll be giving out a signed copy of the book during the live stream. So if you can, join me and Roger, 20th January, 12:45 to 1:30 p.m. UK time. So with that, I think it's just leaves me to say thank you, Jane, once again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And to our listeners, stay well, and we'll see you next time.